The Sheep Pig by Dickin Smith. Chapter 10. Get It Off My Heart. Because Babe had now saved the flock not only from rustlers but also from the worriers, the Hoggets could not do too much for him. Because he was a pig, though Farmer Hogget increasingly found himself thinking of pig as dog and fed him accordingly, they gave him unlimited supplies of what they supposed he could not have too much of, namely food. Because he was strong-minded and revelled in his newfound speed, he ate sparingly of it. Because there was always a lot left over, Fly became fat, and the chickens chubby, and the ducks dumpy, and the very rats and mice rolled happily about in the stables with stomachs full to bursting. Mrs. Hogget even took to calling Babe to the back door to feed him some titbit or other that she thought he might particularly fancy, and from here it was but a short step to inviting him into the house, which one day she did. When the farmer came in for his tea, he found not only Fly but also Pig lying happily asleep beside the Arga cooker. And afterwards, when he sat down in his armchair in the sitting room and switched on the television, Babe came to sit beside him, and they watched the 6 o'clock news together. "He likes it," said Hogget to his wife when she came into the room. Mrs. Hogget nodded her head a great many times, and as usual had a few words to say on the subject. "Dear little chap, though you can't call him little no longer, he growed so much, why he's big enough to you know what, not that he ever shall now, or my dead body though, I hopes it ain't if you do know what I mean. Just look at him, he should have brought him in the house long time ago, no reason why not, is there now?" "He might mess the carpet," said Farmer Hogget. "Never!" cried Mrs. Hogget, shaking her head the entire time that she was speaking. "He no more likely to mess than he is to fly. I'll ask to go out when he does do his dues. He's like a good clean dog would, got more brains than a dog he has. Why, 'twouldn't surprise me to hear he was rounding up them sheep with yarn. 'Twouldn't honestly, though I suppose you think I'm daft." Farmer Hogget grinned to himself. He did not tell his wife what she had never yet noticed, that all the work of the farm was now done by the sheep pig. And he had no intention of telling her of the final part of his plan, which was nothing less than to enter the pig in that sternest of all tests, the Grand Challenge Sheepdog Trials, open to all comers. Never in his working life had he owned an animal good enough to compete in those trials. Now at last he had one, and it was not going to be stopped from realizing his ambition by the fact that it was a pig. In a couple of weeks they would be competing against the best sheepdogs in the country, would be appearing in fact on that very television screen they were now watching. "No, you're not daft," he said. "But you wouldn't half get a surprise when you sit here and watch it," he thought, and so will a lot of other folks. His plan was simple. He would appear at the Grand Challenge trials with Fly, and at the last possible moment swap her for Pig. By then it would be too late for anyone to stop him. It didn't matter what happened afterwards. They could disqualify him, fine him, send him to prison, anything, as long as he could run Pig. Just one glorious run, just to show them all. And they couldn't say they hadn't been warned. The name was there in the entry form. He had been worried, for he was a truthful man, that the heading might say, "Name of dog," and then whatever he put would be a lie. But he'd been lucky. "Name of competitor," the form said. A simple truth. Shepherds usually gave their dogs short names like Jip or Moss. It's so much quicker and easier than shouting Bartholomew or Wilhelmina. And though someone might say Pig, that's a funny name, no one in their wildest dreams would guess the simple truth. The 2 weeks before the Grand Challenge trials were 2 weeks of concentrated activity. Apart from Mrs. Hogget, who as usual was busy with household duties, everyone now knew what was going on. To begin with, Hogget altered the practice course, cutting out all the frills like the plank bridge over the stream, and building a new course as like as possible to what they thought they might face on that day. As soon as Fly saw this, she became convinced that the plan to which she had suspected was actually going to be put into operation, and she told the sheep, with whom she was now on speaking terms. Every night, of course, she and Babe talked endlessly about the coming challenge before they settled to sleep, in the stables still, Though the Hoggets would have been perfectly happy for Babe to sleep in the house, so well-mannered was he. Thoughtful as ever, Babe was anxious, not about his own abilities, but about his foster mother's feelings. He felt certain she would have given her dog teeth to compete in the national trials, the dream of every sheepdog. Yet she must sit and watch him. "Are you sure you don't mind, Mum?" he asked. Fly's reply was as practical as ever. "Listen, Babe," she said. "First of all, it wouldn't matter whether I minded or not. The boss is going to run you, no doubt of it. Second, I'm too old and too fat. And anyway, I was only ever good enough for small local competitions. And lastly, I'll be the happiest collie in the world if you win. And you can win." "Do you really think so?" "I'm sure of it," said Fly firmly. But all the same, she was anxious too, about one thing. She knew that the sheep pig, speedy as he now was, would still be much slower than the dogs, especially on the outrun, but equally she was confident that he could make this up by the promptness with which the sheep obeyed his requests. Here at home they shot through gaps or round obstacles as quick as a flash, never putting a foot wrong. The ones to be shed nipped out of the ring like lightning, and at the final penning they popped in the instant the boss opened the gate. But that was here, at home. What would strange sheep do? How would they react to Babe? Would he be able to communicate with them in time? For there would be none to waste. She determined to ask the flock, and one evening, when Babe and the boss were watching television, she trotted off up the hill. Since that first time when she had been forced to speak civilly to them, they no longer cried wolf at her, and now they gathered around attentively at her first words that were carefully polite. "Good evening," said Fly. "I wonder if you could be kind enough to help me. I've a little problem." And she explained it, speaking slowly and carefully. "For sheep are stupid," she said to herself. "Nobody will ever persuade me otherwise." "You see what I mean," she finished. "There they'll be, these strange sheep, and I'm sure they'll do what he tells them. Asks them, I mean, eventually. But it'll take time explaining things. The last creature they'll be expecting to see is a pig, and they might just bolt at the sight of him before he even gets a chance to speak to them." "Password," said several voices. "What do you mean?" Fly said. "Password, password, password," said many voices now, speaking slowly and carefully. "For wolves are stupid," they said to themselves. "Nobody will ever persuade us otherwise." "What our babes to do," said one, "is to learn what all of us learned when we was little lambs." "'Tis a saying, see," said another, "as lambs do learn at their mother's hocks. And then wherever we do go, to market or to another farm, we won't never come to no harm, as long as we do say the password. And if our babe do say it to they, why then they won't never run away." Fly felt her patience slipping, but she controlled herself, knowing how important this information could be. "Please," she said quietly, "please will you tell me the password?" For a long moment the flock stood silent, the only movement a turning of heads as they looked at one another. Fly could sense that they were nerving themselves to tell this age-old secret, to give away, to a wolf of all things, this treasured countersign. Then, "'Tis for Babe," someone said. "'Tis for his sake." "Arr," they all said softly. "Arr." And then with one voice they began to intone. "I may be ewe, I may be ram, I may be blutton, I may be lamb, but on the hoof or on the hook, I bain't no stupid as I look." Then by general consent they began to move away, grazing as they went. "Is that it?" called Fly after them. "Is that the password?" And the murmur came back. "Arr!" "But what's it all mean, Mum?" said Babe that night when she told him. "All that stuff about I may be you and other words I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me." "That doesn't matter, dear," said Fly. "You just get it off by heart. It may make all the difference on the day.